what you're craving is not really what you need. You may be craving a relationship with someone. What you maybe are needing is a greater level of intimacy, which may not need to come through a man or a woman. It may need to come through God. Hey friends, welcome back to the Baggage Check podcast, where we help you unpack your baggage so that you can build kingdom relationships that bring you closer to your calling. So this is episode number 2, and I am your host, Kiana Williams. If you're unfamiliar with who I am, then you're going to get to know me very well over the course of this episode because I'm super excited about today's topic. If you have not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, then go find us on YouTube, subscribe, watch this episode on YouTube because I feel like the video experience is so much different and it's better in my opinion. So if you haven't done that, then definitely go do that, and then follow us on all our social media channels. If you're not aware of what they are, go down to the description and there will be links to everything if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So, I don't know how many of you guys are breakfast people. It is 10:55, so it's actually breakfast time. I have not eaten yet, but while I was sitting here setting up for this episode, this reminded me of a situation last week where I was really craving cheesy eggs. And anybody that knows me knows that I am not a breakfast person, and I don't really even like eggs. I looked it up because I was like, this is strange. It said that if you're craving cheese, then it may mean that your diet is not heavy enough in fat. So for anybody that has ever been on a diet or trying to eat better, you may notice that you start to crave things.
Hey guys, this is Kiana from the future, yet again in another episode. I just wanted to hop in really quickly because one thing that I wanted to acknowledge is that there are a multitude of reasons why you may actually be craving something that you're no longer doing. One is the reason that I'm talking about here, where your body is craving something that you're deficient in. Another point that I think is so important is that anytime you're trying to make a change, you're also going to crave whatever you're leaving behind. So whether that be people, whether that be literally food, if you're trying to stop eating meat, you're going to crave meat because your body is used to having meat, and we work in habits. The same goes with people. If you're trying to cut someone off, you're going to find yourself missing certain things about that person. Whether or not that relationship was healthy and, thriving, you're still going to miss aspects of that person because it's what you're used to. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's important, but carry on, Kiana. Keep going.
If you look it up, just a Google search and say, what does it mean if you're craving cheese? What does it mean if you're craving eggs? A lot of times it's pointing to something that your body is needing. And so our body and our brain has a really interesting, very complex way, really, of letting you know the things that you're missing based on what you're craving. So I thought that was super interesting the first time that I heard that. And it proved to be true because when I did a little inventory of my diet, I was like, yeah, I'm not eating enough fats. I'm trying to eat better and I'm just doing too much. And we need more fats in the diet. So I want to ask you guys the question, what are you craving in your life? And what void are you attempting to fill with that craving? I think that's a really great question. I wanted to bring us back first to our foundational text. And this is going to be a scripture from Proverbs chapter 14, verse 14 through 21. But we're going to skip around a little bit. It's not going to be the full thing. And this is from the New International Version. So if you see me looking down, y'all know I got my notes and stuff. I like to stay on topic, stay on task, and I want to be able to give as much value as possible. So, the discerning heart seeks knowledge, but the mouth of a fool feeds on folly. And then we're going to skip down to verse 21. Folly brings joy to one who has no sense, but whoever has understanding keeps a straight course. So when we think about the discerning heart, it seeks knowledge. So if you're wanting to to do better, if you're wanting to be able to discern between like what God is telling you to do, what he's telling you to stay away from, what he's telling you to add into your life, and what he's telling you to remove, if you're seeking that, you're seeking knowledge. However, the mouth of a fool feeds on folly. And so what is folly? Because that's not a term that a lot of us use in our day-to-day conversation. So when we think about folly is going to be basically anything that's bringing you away from what his word is and what his desire is for your life.
Hey friends, Kiana from the future again. I just wanted to drop in really quickly just to kind of further elaborate on this point of folly and what it means in the biblical sense when someone is referred to as a fool. So this is going to be someone who's not just like silly or lacks knowledge, but moreover, it's going to be referring to somebody who lacks the proper fear or respect for God. And consequently, as I just explained, it's going to lead to them potentially going in the wrong direction within their life because they are not attuned to what God is telling them and what he's intending for them. And it's more difficult for them to then navigate and discern which way to go.
A lot of times going to be the really attractive things, unfortunately. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in another episode. But one of the things that I've been talking about a lot is that a lot of times we'll find that when we're not in alignment with God, the desires of our flesh are not consistent with what he would have us to have. However, the closer that we get to him, we find that our wants and our desires, our dreams, and even our goals are going to be more consistent with what he would have us to have in whatever season that we're in. And so, case in point, it's the beginning of the year. And so a lot of us are talking about goal setting and what our goals are for the year and the quarter and the month and the week and all this stuff. And when I thought about and talked about, literally wrote out my goals for the year, there was only really one that really stood out to me. And for me, this podcast was the number one goal, the number one thing that I wanted to create this year, that I wanted to launch this year, that I needed to happen. If nothing else on my list happened, the podcast was the single thing that was important for me to get out. And I think that that's very important because this is the first year, just being very transparent, this is the first year where I have a list of goals, but none of them are really important except for getting the podcast done. That was number one, the top priority, the only thing that really mattered, because I knew that getting the podcast done was the only thing on my list of goals that God told me to do. And so I had a belief and a feeling, I had, just all of this faith that once the podcast was released, that God would then release the next thing that I was supposed to do along my journey. And so for me, in trying to communicate what my goals were for this year, I felt like they seemed like lazy goals. It was like, okay, you just want to get a podcast done? Like, that's not going to take all year. It wasn't about the time that it was going to take to get it done. It was about saying that I am releasing control in this situation. And anybody that knows me knows that I am a little controlling. I like things to be a certain way. I like to be in control of my circumstances, of my life, of my activity. And if it doesn't go right, I like to be the person responsible for why it didn't go right. And it's easier for me to take accountability that way. Like, I just like to be in control of as many things as I can. And when I'm not able to do that, it does create some feelings of just anxiety, really. And so this year, my singular focus was this podcast. And then in doing the podcast, getting the first episode out, I've already been able to see the list of things that now God is slowly showing me are coming because I did the first thing. Anybody that has not read this book, The One Thing, I talk about this book all the time. It is my favorite book by Gary Keller. I highly suggest it. It changed my life because it really helps me, somebody who always has all of these plans, all of these ideas, all of these grandiose things. that I want to do, that I want to accomplish, that I want to experience. It helped me really understand that when we think about even the word priority, it at its root means the one thing, the most important thing. A lot of times when we're saying like we have a list of priorities, that is in dissonance with what the actual word priority means. You can't really have a list of priorities. You can't give equal effort to all things in your life. It is always going to be much easier. You're going to find yourself to be much more effective and efficient when you can scale down and focus on one thing and doing that one thing to the best of your ability until you maximize that one thing. And so for me in this season, that one thing is this podcast. However, when I was talking to certain people about what my goals were for this year, again, they seem like lazy goals. And I think the one thing that my mom has always expressed to me, and I never forget it, and I talk about it often, is she told me once, if God wanted them to understand, he would have said it to them. And I don't know who needs to hear that right now, but there's somebody listening that needs to hear that. Everybody is not intended to understand what your goals are. Everybody is not intended to get your vision or get your dream. If it was intended for them to understand your vision, God would have showed it to them. We serve an all-knowing and all-powerful God. So we cannot believe that he gave me this grand vision, and if he wanted to give it to them, he wouldn't have given it to them. He gave it to you for a reason. And that reason may be that you are the one to execute it. It may be that you're able to get a team together that can execute it. It may be that you're the best one to understand what the vision is and then make it happen in some other way. Like, if he gave it to you, it was for you. It wasn't for them. So them not understanding, them not supporting, them not being so excited about it, as excited as you are, that's all irrelevant. If he wanted them to understand it fully to the extent that you do, he would have showed it to them. So I want you to trust in that, whoever needed to hear that. But going back to our foundational text, our scripture, when we think about the mouth of a fool, he feeds on folly. So he's going to be feeding from flesh. He's going to be feeding from his own desires. He's going to be leaning into his own understanding. And yes, we understand that God told us to do this, but a fool that feeds on folly, he's going to be doing this other thing because what God told him, it's not enough for everybody else listening. It's not big enough. It's not grand enough. It's not like this elaborate thing. It's not on the same timeline as everybody that they're watching around them. And so it seems like a lesser than goal. But we have to, in having a discerning heart, we have to continue to seek knowledge, and in that knowledge, it has to be rooted in God. So if God told you to do something, it does not matter who doesn't get it, who doesn't see it, who doesn't believe it to be true. The fact that he gave it to you is proof enough that it is possible. And furthermore, if he gave it to you, that vision, he also gave you all of the means to get that vision accomplished, whether that be people, whether that be resources. And no, maybe you don't see the money in your account right now, but God has given you access to people that have the money. He's giving you access to skill sets that can make you the money. He's giving you access to contacts that can get you jobs that can give you the money. So I want you to be thinking what the vision is that he's giving you. And then I also want you to be thinking, what are the pieces that you need to get it done? And what pieces are already in your tool bag that you haven't even reached in and used? I want us to think how this scripture may play out in our daily lives. And I want you guys to, when you get to the end of this episode, or right now, I want you to go down to the description box because I have inserted a worksheet for you guys to download. So I'm very excited because moving forward, all of the episodes will have a worksheet and questions that you can work through and, you know, get to the bottom of what's going on. Also, I guess this is a great time to announce that the next step, as we're talking about what my goals were for this year, is that I see that God is telling me to create a community for women. So I have tried to do that one other time, and it wasn't the time. It was me wanting to do it in my time. And he told me back then that I think that's where the spark kind of came from initially, but he wasn't telling me to do it right now. It was kind of like a foreshadowing thing where he was showing me this was coming up. So he planted that seed of hunger in me back then, over a year ago, and I wanted to execute it on it then, but I wasn't ready. So we're getting ready for it. And so there will be a community that I am creating and putting out for women. I want you guys to, if you're interested in joining that community, to go on to theminglebrand.com. There's a link down in the description box. And I want you to get on the wait list because that community is going to be amazing. By the time you're watching this or listening to this, you can definitely join the wait list. If not, join the actual community, depending on when you're watching. And it's going to just be a great place. We're going to have a lot of exercises, a lot of actionable activities. There's going to be a lot of education. There's going to be guest speakers. There's going to be a book club. There's going to be meet and greets and all kinds of things that we're going to be doing together. And I'm super, super excited, as well as weekly live calls and just a really lovely community of like-minded women. And so if you are interested in the content that we continue to talk about here on this podcast, on the Baggage Check podcast, then make sure you join the wait list so that you can know when enrollment is open for that community. But going back to what we're talking about here. So when we're talking about, again, what does that mean in terms of our relationships for us to have a discerning heart that seeks knowledge? So I want y'all to put this in the comment section. Who is guilty of using the phrase, "This is just the way that I am. I've always been this way. This is who I am"? I think it is so unfortunate that there are so many of us that tie negative traits to our identity. I'm gonna let that sit for a minute. I think it's very unfortunate there are so many of us, again, that tie negative traits to our identity. And when I say that, I mean that it is sad. The amount of times I've heard people say, you are being too emotional. You're being too sensitive. I should be able to talk the way that I want to talk, whether that is aggressive or rude or disrespectful. That's just the way that I am. You should know me better than to feel a way if I'm talking in that way, because that's just who I am. I think that you are cutting yourself short, that you are not giving yourself enough credit if you believe that to be nasty and disrespectful to someone else is just who you are. You are just innately a disrespectful person. That is selling yourself way, way short. I think if you're saying, I'm just late all the time, this is just the way that I am, I think that it is sad and you are selling yourself short. If you say, I'm just an irresponsible spender, this is just the way that I am, you should just accept me for who I am, you are selling yourself short. To be irresponsible, to be disrespectful, to be untimely, to be insensitive, to be inconsiderate, if any of those things are just who you are and you really believe that, then the problem is deeper than what you even realize it to be. It is unacceptable to continue to tie negative traits to your identity. Why would God have created you in his image, but the best that he could do was to create you as disrespectful, dishonest, inconsiderate? That is not the God that we serve. It is impossible that you are created in his image, but concurrently you were created to be those negative things. So I want us to take a really honest, introspective look at who we say we are. And I want us to do the self-work to figure out how and why we have attached those negative traits to our identity. And then I want us to untether them, because there is no reason and no excuse really for us to continue living our lives in that way. And when we think about making the decision, because if we don't unpack in that way and get to the root of that, then we are making a decision ultimately to go against God's will, because God's will for our life is not for us to be dishonest. It's not for us to be deceitful and manipulative and all of these things. It's not for us to be that. God's will for our life is going to be tied to all things benevolent, all things that glorify him, and us being dishonest does not glorify him. None of those traits that I mentioned glorify him in any way. Our ability to work past those things, get past them and do better, that glorifies him. So maybe the testimony is in you overcoming those things, but there is no testimony where you stay in that place. There is no testimony where you stay in the things that have served you in the past. And maybe that has produced great things for you in the past. I want you to think, though, if you being all of those things who we've already talked about are not in alignment with God's image, so those were not his will for our life. If you've been able to create greatness, even given all of those handicaps, imagine what's waiting for you once you start to unpack those things. Because if he's giving you a glimpse of what you've been able to accomplish thus far with all of that going on, all of that packed away and tucked away and taken from place to place, imagine what he's waiting to bless you with once you really get into alignment with what he's called you to do and who he's called you to be. There is a worksheet down below that helps you unpack all of that and work through all of those things and really see, again, going back to the first episode of the podcast, what things need to stay in your baggage and what things need to be removed. I think that one thing that's very good to acknowledge is that not all baggage is bad. And I don't know if I explicitly said this in the first episode, but I think that's worth understanding. Not all baggage is bad. And that's kind of what I was getting at with the analogy about the toiletry bag. The toiletry bag stays packed. It's up to me to kind of see what items are needed and which ones aren't. I'm going out of town right after this recording to Charleston, and I looked at my toiletries bag and I took some stuff out. Like, I literally just did this about an hour ago. I went through and I said, I don't need this for this trip. I don't need that. This is a mess. Let me take this out and let me put new things in, a new deodorant, a new toothbrush, all these new things in there. Not all baggage is bad. What you're going to want to do is just look at what's being packed and what's being taken with you, and then figure out, does this serve me in this season or does it not? Does it serve me for this trip or does it not serve me? Am I ready, if I know that it doesn't serve me, am I ready to remove it? Some items that you know are packed that do not serve you, you are not ready to remove yet. And that honestly is okay. Everything is not going to happen at the drop of a dime. Just because you know something is not right doesn't mean that you're necessarily ready to fix it. That is not my goal. It's not just like, oh, all of a sudden I'm telling you to fix these things. You know that they're wrong. Now fix them. That's not realistic. What we can do, though, is say, okay, it's incremental. The first step to recovery, as they always say, is acknowledging that you have a problem. So if I know that this is a problem, that's the first step, because there's some knowledge and there's some self-actualization there where it's like, okay, this is not serving me anymore. That's the first step. That doesn't, though, mean that you're automatically ready to fix it or that you even know how to fix it immediately. But then over time, that's why we have this podcast, which is weekly. Over time, you'll get the tools, you'll get the knowledge, you'll get the biblical principles that support what I'm saying. And you'll say, okay, I'm going to get a little bit better today. 1% better. Every single day. Just 1% better. And over time, you'll notice that that's not even an issue anymore. You've corrected that issue, and maybe now there's something else that you need to focus on, which is fine. We're always growing, so I think that's always good. But I think that in this season, and pertaining to this episode, I want us to really think about what we want. And I want us to think about why we want those things. because a lot of times what you're craving is not really what you need. You may be craving a relationship with someone. What you maybe are needing is a greater level of intimacy, which may not need to come through a man or a woman. It may need to come through God. What you may be craving is more followers on Instagram, but maybe what you're needing is acknowledgement and affirmation. And you're hoping that that will come through likes and through engagement on your posts and all of these things. You may be craving things that seem so superficial and so easy. The problem is when you get those things, you're still not fulfilled. And now you're spiraling into this state of unhappiness where you don't understand what the problem is because you got exactly what it was that you wanted and then you still weren't happy because what you were craving was not really the root of the turmoil that you were experiencing. So I want us to all continue to take inventory. And you'll also find an activity down in the description box attached to that worksheet. But the activity that I want us to all focus on today is I want us to really identify what our desires are. I want you to identify areas of your life where those desires may be indicative of an area for improvement. So, like I said, maybe your desire is, okay, I want to make, I don't know, $500,000 this quarter, this year. I don't know, wherever you're at. I want you to say, okay, why? Why is that goal important to me? Why? And then continue to ask why. Like, just keep asking why. Okay, if I say, I want to make $500,000 this quarter, why? I want to be able to take trips. Why? And sometimes it's a legitimate goal and it's rooted in great things and all these great intentions. And sometimes you'll find that your goals are either one, not yours. They do not belong to you. They are something that other people have expectations and all these things and desires and wants for you. Two, you'll find sometimes that your goals are really for other people, like not even just it's what other people want for you, but it's you trying to compete with other people, or you trying to prove something to other people, or you trying to prove that you're worthy or that you belong in these circles or that you're just as good as these people or that you've overcome all these things. You're doing this for other people. And so I want you to really look at what your desires are, and I want you to get to the root of why you even desire those things. And then I want you to identify if that means that there's any room for improvement in any area of your life pertaining to those goals. And if there are, I want you to reroute your desires. So if you find that, okay, $500,000, that's really just so I could buy a Rolls Royce and I could fly on a private jet and I could do all these things. And so that's why I'm trying to make $2 million this year if I'm doing $500,000 a quarter. And you may find that what it takes to make $500,000 in a quarter, given whatever your business practices are, is not worth just, making that, the effort that it would take to make that is not worth just doing all these things so you can show people that you got money. That maybe that time can be used for something else. So then that changes what you actually desire. So if you're trying to do that so that you can get acknowledgement and acceptance and all of these things and pats on the back, you may find that maybe your effort and time should go into facilitating more authentic relationships with people that don't expect you to do all of these lavish things in order to be accepted in their group. That's just a thought. That's just a thought. But that's going to be the kind of circling back around. That's going to be the really great thing about our community is that it's going to allow me to give you guys these activities and then for us to have a community of women where we can talk about this stuff and we can talk about how, what are our desires? Where are they rooted in? Is there anybody else that's struggling with what you're struggling with? So I was getting into it, talking about the community, and then the camera stopped recording. But again, that's the really great thing about the community. So if you are interested in that, make sure that you go down, find the link in the description box, and then you join the waitlist so that you can be notified once the community is open and ready to start accepting people. Before we go, this has been a great conversation. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure that you like this video, that you share this with somebody that needs to see it, or if you're listening on the podcast that needs to hear it. I'm so excited. This conversation, I was very excited to have, and I'm very excited about what I feel like it brought up and some of the things that we talked about. I didn't even intend to talk about. And so I know that that was God working and moving through the conversation. And so I want to just say, Lord, I thank you. We praise you. We magnify your name, dear God. I know that there is someone listening that got more than what they even came for today. So God, we thank you for bringing us here today. We thank you for the understanding that we are created after a beautiful, wonderful, all-knowing, all-powerful God. We thank you for discernment. We thank you that you are leading us and guiding us along a path. And I know that there is someone listening who is struggling with feeling like they are accepted, with feeling like they are good enough, feeling like their efforts are being acknowledged and being seen, and that they are valuable, and that their presence in this world makes a difference. I know that there is someone here who is struggling with the next steps that they need to take within their life. And so, God, we thank you in advance for all of the direction and guidance and love and nurturing that you're going to give those people, that person that's experiencing that right now. God, we ask that with all things, we're able to see with a discerning heart and feel with a discerning heart. We ask that you remove any tendencies towards leaning into our own understanding or being a person with a folly mindset. We ask that you allow us to become more aligned with what you would desire for our lives and who you would allow us to be in this season. Dear God, we know that you have a plan for our life that is beautiful and that exceeds anything that we could ever imagine with our own vision. And so we thank you for that understanding that if you have given it to us, if you have blessed us with that understanding, that vision, that goal, that dream, that you have already equipped us with all of the necessary tools that we need to make that a reality. Dear God, we thank you. We love you. We value you, and we lift your name up high. For you alone are worthy of the praise. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for joining me. Make sure that you subscribe, and y'all have a great rest of your week. Bye.